Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing an updated presidential election prediction for the month of April. But before I start, I'd like to say if you like my content, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you know when we upload, and also leave a like and comment. And with that said, let's get into it. So as always, we have the nominees, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. And we're going to start with the solid states for Joe Biden. Those are going to be Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, New Mexico, Colorado, Illinois, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine's 1st Congressional District and District of Columbia. As for the solid states for Trump, we have Montana, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Nebraska's 3rd and 1st Congressional Districts, as well as Nebraska at large, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, and West Virginia. Now I'm going to fill in the likely states for Joe Biden, and I'm going to start with Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District is a very suburban area. It's the home of Omaha and its suburbs, and it really epitomizes why Trump lost in 2020, because he actually won this district in 2016, and then he lost it by over 6 points in 2020, and that's because Trump really all across the country tanked in the suburbs. In 2022, districts were redrawn, and the 2nd district did become more red, but the suburban trends are probably going to continue, not at the rate that they did from 2016 to 2020, but enough that this district won't flip back, so I am calling it likely Democrat. Next up is going to be the state of Virginia. In 2020, Biden won this state by over 10 points, which was an increase from when Hillary Clinton won it by a little more than 5 in 2016. And he won it by that much largely because of the suburban trends in Northern Virginia, and also because Trump was very unpopular going into the 2020 election. In 2021, we saw that under the right circumstances, Virginia can still go red when it elected Glenn Youngkin as governor. And in 2022, despite the lack of the expected red wave, Virginia Democrats only won the congressional ballot by around 4 points. Now, I don't think Virginia is going to trend right by that much in a higher turnout election, but I do still think it's going to swing a little bit to the right, so I am going to call Virginia likely Democrat. Next up is going to be the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire voted for Hillary Clinton by less than 1% in 2016, and then in 2020, Biden won it by almost 8%. Overall, it seems like New Hampshire has become much more of a blue state than the swing state it used to be, especially against Trump, but because Biden's approval is so low, I don't think New Hampshire is going to move very much in either direction, so I'm still calling it likely Democrat. Similar story in the state of Maine. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won it by less than 3 points, and then in 2020, Biden won it by almost 10 points. I don't think it's going to move very much in either direction. Part of the reason it was so close in 2016 is because there was relatively high third-party turnout, so if RFK's campaign kind of keeps its momentum and gets on the ballot in Maine, it could get kind of close, but until that happens, I'm just going to keep it at likely Democrat. Next, I'm going to fill in the likely states for Trump, starting with the state of Alaska. Alaska is a state that used to be very, very Republican, but in recent years, it's been trending more and more towards Democrats. And in 2022, in the special election to fill John Young's seat, the Democrat actually flipped it, Mary Peltola. It was a ranked choice voting election, and it was the first election to be held under that system, which helped Democrats there because there were 2 Republicans going head-to-head. That's not going to be a factor in the presidential race. But the trends in Alaska, regardless of the ranked choice voting system, are still favorable to Democrats. Donald Trump only won the state by 10 last time, so I think it is going to be knocked into the single digits, but I think Trump will still win it comfortably, so I'm calling it likely Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Texas. Now, Texas is another state that used to be very solid Republican and in recent years has trended towards Democrats. In 2016, Trump was the first Republican to win Texas by single-digit margin since 1996, and in 2020, that margin decreased even further to slightly less than 6 points. That was actually an overperformance from the polls because polls had Texas very, very close, and Trump ended up winning it by more than 5 points. It is true that the suburban areas of Texas are trending towards Democrats, but trends with Hispanic voters, especially in southern Texas, are helping Republicans keep their hold on this state. And now with Biden's low approval and immigration being one of the top issues in the country, and it's an issue that Republicans are very popular on according to polling, I do think that Trump is probably going to win this state, maybe by a little more than he won it by in 2020, so I am calling it likely Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Florida. Florida, notably in 2020, was one of the only states to swing towards Trump when the rest of the country swung against Trump. He won it by a little over a point in 2016 and won it by over 3 points in 2020. And ever since then, Florida has just gotten redder and redder. Voter registration patterns are showing Republicans with a huge advantage, close to 1 million voter registration advantage when in 2020 they didn't even have the majority of voters at that point. Of course, in 2022, Republicans won by landslides in Florida. Ron DeSantis won re-election by almost 20 points. Marco Rubio won re-election by around 16 points, and Republicans across the state did very well. With all this in mind, I think Trump probably will win Florida by around 8 to 9 points, so I am calling it likely Republican. And finally, we have Maine's 2nd Congressional District. This is an area that's very favorable to Trump. In 2012 and 2008, Obama won this district by big margins. Then in 2016, Trump flipped it by around 10 points when Hillary Clinton only won the state by around 2. And in 2020, Trump still won the district by around 7 points when Biden ended up winning the state by almost 10. For similar reasons to Maine at large, I don't really see Maine's 2nd Congressional District swinging very much in either direction, so I'm just keeping it likely Republican. Now we can finally get into the toss-up states. We are starting with Joe Biden at 216 electoral votes and Donald Trump at 219 electoral votes. So it's still anyone's game here. We're going to go through all the swing states, going from west to east, starting with the state of Nevada. In 2020, Biden won Nevada by around 2.4%, which is almost exactly the same margin that Hillary Clinton won Nevada by in 2016. And that is worth noting because Nevada stayed completely stagnant despite the fact that Trump was a lot less popular in 2020 and despite the fact that COVID was happening. So when the entire country moved against Trump, Nevada was one of the only states to move towards him very, very slightly. Trends have been pretty good for Republicans in Nevada for a while now. Every presidential election year since 2008, Nevada has swung towards the Republican candidate. And the main reason for this is because Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is, it's the biggest population center in Nevada, that has been trending towards Republicans. And that's actually the reason the governorship flipped in 2022, because Joe Lombardo, the new governor, is from Clark County. He was the sheriff there for 8 years, and so he was able to cut that margin down. He didn't win the county, but he got the margin down low enough for the Democrat Steve Sisolak that he was able to beat him. The main thing holding Republicans back is Washoe County in the Northwest. That has been trending away from Republicans and toward Democrats. And in 2022, when Adam Laxalt was running for Senate, the Republican, he actually lost Washoe County, even though it had gone Republican 6 years before, and he lost the state by a smaller margin than the 2016 Republican candidate did. Right now, Trump has a relatively strong lead of about 3 points over Joe Biden in Nevada, but Nevada polls tend to overestimate Republicans. 2020 was an exception, but even in 2016, when polls broadly overestimated Trump across the country, they still underestimated him in Nevada. So I'm kind of inclined to think they're overestimating him a little bit now. I do still think he's going to win the state, but I think it's going to be more narrow than polls are showing, so I am calling Nevada tilt Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Arizona, which is another state where Democrats have very favorable trends, mostly in Maricopa County, which is where Phoenix is. In 2020, Biden won Maricopa County. He was the first Democrat to win Maricopa County, I think since Harry Truman in 1948. Despite this, he did only win the state by 1/3%. But then in 2022, Kari Lake lost the governorship when she was supposed to win it, according to polls, to Katie Hobbs. And then in the Senate race in the same year, Mark Kelly won re-election to a full term over Blake Masters by almost 5 points. So the trends in Arizona are very good for Democrats, but on the other hand, right now Trump has a 5.2% lead in the polls over Biden in Arizona, and that is even larger when you take into account third parties. And I think this is for a couple of reasons. One, of course, Biden nationally is just very unpopular, and two, like I mentioned earlier, the border and immigration are a very important issue right now that favors Republicans, and Arizona is a border state, so that's probably boosting Trump there. Recent polls have tended to overestimate Republicans in Arizona, but right now Trump's leading by 5. I think that's outside the margin of error, so I do think Trump's going to win pretty narrowly, but I am going to call it tilt Republican in Arizona. Next up is going to be the state of Minnesota. In 2016, Minnesota came dangerously close to flipping. Hillary Clinton only won it by a little more than 1 point. But then in 2020, when everyone thought it was kind of going to be an important swing state because of how close it was in 2016, ended up going for Biden by over 7 points and trending way away from the rest of the country. In hindsight now, everyone recognizes that the reason Minnesota was so close in 2016 was because of the relatively high third-party share. But now with the national trends that we're seeing in the polling, with Trump leading in the national polls and the fact that there's probably going to be a decent third-party share, I do think Minnesota is going to be closer than it was in 2020. I think Biden will still win it. I think it's going to be probably a little more than 3 points, so I am calling Minnesota lean Democrat, but it is going to be closer than it was in 2020. Next up is going to be the state of Wisconsin. Now, in 2016, Trump flipped Wisconsin by 0.7%, and that was the first time a Republican won it on the presidential level since 1984. But then in 2020, when Biden defeated Trump, Wisconsin was one of these states that he flipped by an even smaller 0.6%. And right now, Trump is leading Biden by 0.6 in the Real Clear Politics average, but Wisconsin polls have notoriously overestimated Democrats against Trump. In 2016, I think they overestimated Hillary Clinton by 6 points, and in 2020, they overestimated Biden by 6 points. So if you applied that same error to this election, Trump would be winning Wisconsin easily. I don't think it's going to happen that way, though. I don't think polling is going to be that far off, especially not in that direction. And in 2022, polling actually overestimated Republicans, so really could go either way here. If Trump does win Wisconsin, it's going to be because he managed to hold his ground in the rurals, especially in the WOW counties, and managed to do better in the urban and rural areas. Overall, because of Biden's low approval right now and because Donald Trump is leading the polls in Wisconsin, I do think he's going to win it by a couple points, so I am calling Wisconsin lean Republican. Next up is going to be the state of Michigan, and Michigan is another state where Trump won in 2016 very narrowly, and then in 2020, Joe Biden flipped it back. Right now, this is actually one of Trump's best swing states in terms of polling averages. Right now, he's leading Biden by 3.4 points. But if he wins Michigan, it's going to be a similar story to Wisconsin. It means he held his ground in the suburban areas and did better in the rural and urban areas. And it is worth noting, it's not a huge portion of Michigan's population, but Michigan does have a relatively high Muslim population. So if progressives continue to disapprove of Biden's handling of the Israel versus Palestine conflict, that is going to hurt him in Michigan. It won't hurt him as much as a lot of conservative pundits are saying, but it will hurt him. Ultimately, because Trump is leading the polls by so much, and this late, it's only 7 months until the election now, I do think that he is going to win the state of Michigan. I think it's going to be very narrow, though, so I am calling it tilt Republican. Next up is the state of Georgia. Now, in 2016, Trump won Georgia by over 5 points. And then in 2020, this was kind of the surprise flip of the night. Joe Biden did win Georgia by a very, very small 0.2 percentage points. Since then, results have been pretty mixed for both parties in the state of Georgia. In 2020 and 2021, the runoff elections in Georgia both went to Democrats for the Senate. Then in 2022, things went a lot better for Republicans. They did still lose the Senate seat to Raphael Warnock when he won a full term, but he was going against a very poor candidate in Herschel Walker, and he still only won pretty narrowly in a runoff election. Otherwise, Republicans did very well throughout the state. Brian Kemp won re-election to a second term by around 7 points. Something that helped Biden in the state in 2020 was higher black voter turnout in Atlanta. And if 2024 is going to be a lower turnout election and Biden is unpopular, black voters are probably not going to turn out as much. And so that is going to hurt him in the state. And that's showing in the polling. Right now, Trump is up by 4.5% head-to-head against Biden. It could be that 2020 was a fluke. Overall, I do think the trends are there for Democrats, but 2024, it just looks like it's shaping up not to be a great year for Democrats. So I do think Trump's going to flip Georgia back by a couple points, but long term, I do think Georgia is going to the Democrats. Next up is going to be the state of North Carolina. And North Carolina is actually the only state that I had labeled as a toss-up that actually went to Trump in 2020. He won it by 1.5 points, and in 2016, he won it by over 3 points. North Carolina is a state that Democrats don't really have much luck in, especially in federal races. Right now, Republicans hold both Senate seats, and Trump won it 2 times, of course. Right now, Trump is leading the polls in North Carolina by a similar margin to the polls in Georgia, and of course, he won it twice already. When he's flipping all of these states already, I don't think he's going to lose North Carolina. I think he's going to win North Carolina by a couple points, probably around his 2016 margin, so I am calling North Carolina lean Republican. Finally, we have the state of Pennsylvania, which is another state that used to be very Democratic. Then Trump flipped it in 2016, and then it flipped back to Biden in 2020 very narrowly. It's kind of a similar story to Michigan and Wisconsin that I mentioned. He needs to hold his ground in the suburbs and do better in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh if he wants to win. Right now, he is narrowly leading the polls by 0.6, but Pennsylvania is another state that usually underestimates Trump. So I could see Pennsylvania voting for Trump by a larger margin than this. But just like most of the rest of the country, polls did underestimate Democrats in 2022. By election day, Dr. Oz was actually leading the Real Clear Politics average. And Josh Shapiro was also leading it, but not by the 14-point margin that he won by. He was probably leading it by 5, if my memory serves me correctly. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but because of Biden's unpopularity and because of polling history in Pennsylvania when Trump is on the ballot, I do think he's going to narrowly win Pennsylvania, so I am going to call Pennsylvania tilt Republican. So, with all of these states filled in, I have Donald Trump at 312 electoral votes and Joe Biden at 226, which means Donald Trump will win the 2024 presidential election, according to my current prediction. We're kind of at the point where the election's starting to feel a lot more real. You're starting to see ads on TV and websites for each candidate. And so far, polling has just kind of remained where it's been for the last couple months. For a while, Democrats were saying, or they were at least hoping, that once people realized it was going to be a rematch, people would come home to Joe Biden. Now it's officially been a rematch for almost a month, and it doesn't seem like polls are really shifting in his favor all that much. If I were the Biden campaign, I'd be worried, but I wouldn't be freaking out yet. But it is starting to get real, like I said, especially going into the summer, and May is really when people start to pay more attention. If you can get a lot of momentum going during the summer, Biden could still win this. If Trump is still maintaining his leads in all of these states after the conventions, though, that's when Democrats should probably start panicking, especially because Trump is leading in every single swing state. If Biden and Trump were kind of splitting the swing states and Biden was up by 2 to 3 in the national polls, that would be one thing. But right now, Donald Trump is leading national popular vote polls when he, in both of his elections, did not win the popular vote. And he is leading polls in every single state he won in 2016, plus Nevada. There's still 7 months left, so this election is far from over. But if Joe Biden wants to win, he's going to need to recover support in the swing states. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like my content, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you know when we upload. Leave a like and comment and tell me what you agree with and what you disagree with. And with that said, thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day.